Hello and welcome to another episode of Mjolnir the Movies. I can't remember what episode it is. We're out of sync, I think, now. But anyway, it's another episode. And with me, as ever, are Neil Westwood.
Hello.
Hello. And James.
Hello.
Hello to you too. And this week, we're going to... Oh, we've got a treat in store for you. We're looking at the 1970s, partly animated, partly live action, partly forgotten, blaxploitation film Coonskin. Am I allowed to say that? I'm not quite sure if I'm allowed to say the title of this, which was really the work of one man, Ralph Bakshi, who wasn't black at all, but Jewish. Now, where shall we begin with this? I think we'd better leave the racial stuff until after we've discussed it as a film, or we'll never get anywhere, because the racial stuff is very much to the fore in this film. So, what did you think of this garbage as a film? I don't want to influence you, anybody here.
Well, the thing is, it's almost impossible to not reference the racial stuff because the opening credit song is a racial song. You can't even go 2 seconds into the movie without some kind of racial connotation to it.
That's very true. Again, I don't know if I can say this, but the song is called "I'm a Nigger Man." The interesting thing, of course, is that although it's a black singer who sings it, Scatman Crothers, actually, who appeared in The Shining. We covered The Shining in a different episode. But the lyrics themselves were by Ralph Bakshi, who is not black himself, but Jewish. Well, I know what you're saying. I know it's very difficult to get past the racial stuff because it really does hammer you with the racial stuff. But could we say anything about this in terms of filmmaking, in terms of cinematography, and in terms of the art of craftsmanship of making an animated film, or partly animated film at least anyway? Perhaps we can look a bit on that and on the plot and things like that.
But well, you could, but even the animation, it's so sternly obvious that it's depicting racial stereotypes, every single one of them. It'd be impossible to get away from that. But we can talk about the really crappy editing. And it looked like it'd been edited by Edward Scissorhands. There were so many insane cuts in it. It's very hard to look at the film professionally because of the storyline, which is non-existent. It just seemed like a big excuse to. I don't even know what is an excuse to do, but it's just that bad. It's terrible. And the only thing decent to talk about is the racial
there's
stuff.
No love or pride. No love or pride went into this at all, because anybody that watches this, especially if you've got an eye for filmmaking or audio, it must stand out like a sore thumb. You'll see lots of really poor quality edits and cuts in voiceovers, and you'll see where things have been spliced together in ways that nobody that actually cared about the end product would do. You would sort that out at some point, especially seeing as this was the sort of auteur film, which was mostly the work of one man sort of driving it. That usually is a labour of love, normally.
There was one thing that was really impressive, I thought, for the time, 1975, and the only piece of animation where you could tell a lot of effort was taken into making was of Miss America. That's like they focused in on, they got their best animator in on to do her, and she's supposed to be this white girl who is like the beauty of America, and all the black men want to do is to have sex with her, but she's got this hidden weapon in between her legs that kills them when they try. But you notice they focused all the attention on her.
Yeah, very much so. And this, I think, goes into Bakri's obsession with pornography. She's very much a figure of pornography. It's interesting, actually, that the distributors of the company, Bryanston Distributing Company, which was owned by a crime lord, Anthony Pereno, who was the mafia boss. That was the same company that distributed Deep Throat, among other pornographic films. Also, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But there are very much pornographic elements to the film, and if you notice, it's the pornographic elements that have the highest quality, if you like, in terms of filmmaking.
Yeah.
For me, it says a lot about the filmmaker. That you know, that it's the pornographic bits that he takes most loving care over.
The live action was terrible. I mean, even the intro, when you hear the performances given by Barry White and the rest of them, it's just low quality. That any director, if he was there, would have said, "No, please, can you repeat that or give the performance in a certain way?" You could have squeezed out something better from them, but they must have just got the line they wanted and just said, "Fine, that's enough. Ship it."
Yeah, there was no thought behind it. Like
that's
in
right.
terms of timing.
It looks like one take stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I would actually say these days it's sub YouTube quality, because people would expect better from most of these YouTubers.
It's very true. What about the plot itself? Because the plot is equally disjointed as the transitions from scene to scene, aren't they?
It's. I can see what they were trying to do. It was supposed to be Carruthers, when they're these two black guys are escaping the prison. They're hanging about outside the wall waiting for their big moment to escape. And Carruthers relays this fictional story to him about these guys that are coming to rescue them. At least I think that's what it was about.
Yeah, it's that's right. You've got a sort of blend of Uncle Remus, and Scatman Crothers is meant to be Uncle Remus in this postmodern retelling of an Uncle Remus tale, whereby the three people who come to rescue them from the prison or to help them break out become the three central animated characters: the rabbit, the bear, and the fox. So pretty much related to Brer Rabbit, Brer Bear, and Brer Fox. It's the underlying idea, and well, that's about all we can say about it, really, I think.
You'll notice even some of the attempts to be clever was like a child trying to be clever, because it was so crap, to be honest. Like when they had the cop pull them over when they were speeding in the car towards the prison for the breakout. Well, it's obviously meant to represent the kind of the bad cop oppressing them or harassing them unfairly. Except they did the exact opposite. They showed the car speeding towards the prison breakout. The policeman asked them a reasonable question, and Preacher, or Fox in the animated segments, as he's called, suddenly starts ranting incoherently at the policeman, who naturally enough would be nervous, and then as the policeman reaches for his gun out of safety, he gets shot. And you'll notice what they do with the policeman, which is even more absurd, is they have him wearing the big aviator shades to cover as much of his face as possible and dehumanize, remove any sympathy. But it's night. Why would the policeman be wearing his shades in a completely black night?
Yeah, it's. I mean, they've not paid any attention to the plot whatsoever, have they? Really? And I mean, it's a huge roadblock. How the hell did three guys manage to shoot their way through that roadblock?
With one small revolver as well, while stuck in the seat of a car.
See, the thing is, this movie supposed to be a blaxploitation movie, because when I watched it, expecting it to be I don't know, really anti-white or something like that. I found out that it's not even a blaxploitation film. It almost strikes me as a big joke that somebody played on to make fun of blacks and whites in equal measure, because all the white guys in the movie, all their sons are all gay, and they all hang about in the subways dressed as trannies. They're all fat and they're all deviants. I mean, it really pokes fun at everybody, equal measures, apart from one specific group, which I probably shouldn't name.
It was extremely cruel to everyone, really. I mean, you see that even from the whole start of this film, where you see people try and promote this as somehow uplifting or it's black revenge on cinema or something. But you look at the whole story where you've got two blacks escaping a prison. So there's a stereotype there that's not very healthy. You've got two people trying to break them out, gunning down cops, and their whole story's full of crime, prostitution, and constantly negative imagery. There's nothing uplifting or positive or inspiring about it from start to finish.
I mean, like, you've got an entire scene which is, from what I guess, looking at it, is supposed to be the sons of this Italian mobster called the Godfather, and the two sons are secretly transsexuals or transgenders who hide in the subway, who are having an incestuous affair with each other. And I'm just watching this; it's bewildering.
The whole obsession with transgenderism in this thing was bizarre as well, where you just out the blue got the two sons, if it's taken literally, their sons rather than some sort of term for, mobsters, but
Maybe,
if they're his sons, they're having an incestuous relationship in a bin as well in the street.
yeah.
You
I
know,
was like, what's
as
going on
people
here?
do. But the thing about it is, once they show that, what part of the plot, what does this tell plot wise, story wise, character development wise? It doesn't do anything other than shock, or trying to stab at some group. It's not there for any plot reasons, or it doesn't do any good other than just another kind of mindless shock or jab at somebody.
Yep, yep. And the very first joke in the movie. In fact, the very first line in the movie is "fuck you." Then Scatman goes on to some tirade about white people jumping off the bridges.
Yeah, that's right. It's mocking the amount of white people committing suicide off the Golden Gate Bridge or something, isn't it?
Yeah, right from the get-go. Right from the get-go. It had no relevance to the rest of the movie whatsoever.
But it does, I suppose, in an honest way, set it up for what it is. It's about baiting people, really. I mean, I think that's what the purpose of the film.
Yeah, you're right. This film, I think, is all about race baiting, and we're going to have to address the elephant in the room, and that's that this is a 100% Jewish film. The guy who created the thing, Ralph Bakshi, is Jewish. The guy who produced the film, Albert S. Ruddy, is Jewish. And for this to have such a negative view of both blacks and whites and the world in general, for me, it just shows the Jewish mentality and the Jewish view of the world. And certainly, we have to look at how both blacks and whites are portrayed in this film. And I personally think that what's going on here is they're trying to portray blacks, and they're trying to manipulate blacks into being a certain way. Actually, they're trying to make black people into niggers. Hence the song right at the beginning, "I'm a nigger man." And why would a black man in any case call himself a nigger? That's something that I've never understood. Uh, and where has this come from? Again, it's come from certain forms of music that have been thrust onto black people, really, and it's been promoted by the people who own the means of production, if you like, by the people who decide which culture gets into the mainstream in America, particularly. And it's interesting, of course, that this film, as you both know, and we talked about earlier, was approved of by because it got a huge backlash, didn't it? I'll start with the backlash when it first came out, if someone wants to take that on. Nope, I'll take it on then if no one's volunteering.
On you go.
Well, of course, when it first came out, now it was the release was in May of 1975, but I mean the thing was done by the end of 1974, and it was given a limited release in January 1975, and it immediately was met with protests, especially by the Congress of Racial Equality, and the protests were led by a negress called Elaine Parker, and that group, the Congress of Racial Equality, had a Negro chairman, Roy Innis. Interestingly, in contrast to that, the NAACP approved of it. You know, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored Persons approved of it. Now, what's interesting is, of course, that the NAACP at this time is not run by black people at all. The president is a Jewish guy called Kiri Kaplan.
I don't believe you. No, I do believe you, actually.
Yeah.
Although at least it shows that, you know, people can have an instinct for when something is not in their interest or is against them or is somehow cruel towards them, even if it's just mockery. And they've got to have the wool pulled over their eyes to accept it. Because the response, the natural early response to it before you had these big official organisations and the critics all swoop in trying to praise it and make it something that's not, you could see the natural opposition form to it in the form of the protests and the upset by it, because it is a cruel film towards them as well as whites and others. You know, there's no respect or love for them shown in it at all.
No, that's right. They're being used as a tool against white people. Now, I've mentioned this before, and I think I mentioned it in a previous podcast, that in the film The Blues Brothers, you've got the neo-Nazis, the American Nazi Party or whatever, and they're on this bridge, and there's Henry Gibson there, who's the leader of the American Nazis, and he's giving the speech on the loud hailer. Of course, he gets forced into jumping over the bridge into the river by the Blues Brothers as they drive their car across it, and he's made to look ridiculous. But what he says is that the blacks are being, the Negro is being used as muscle by the Jew. And of course, what they've done is, because that again, you know, is a Jewish film. What they've done is they've put this speech that is extremely true in the mouth of an idiot, in the mouth of someone who is a figure of lampoonery and buffoonery and so on. And by associating it with that person, it is put into the mind of the person that what he says is also ridiculous. So the viewer thinks that what he says is ridiculous because it's associated with him. Just like as we were talking about David Icke and so on, when you, Neil, mentioned that 95% of what he says is true. And then he puts in 5% of complete bonkers, absolutely insane horseshit. And the same with Alex Jones. I nearly said Alan Jones then.
Two different people, I think.
that would be interesting, wouldn't it, if Alan Jones actually came out with that stuff. Yeah, Alex Jones, he's very much the American version of David Icke. And these people occupy a certain space, and I think quite deliberately, in making genuine conspiracies sound retarded.
Yeah.
Also trapping people that have an instinct that there's something wrong into an endless rabbit hole that'll just waste their time and energy, and that rather very suspiciously money, as we find out, of course, with Alex Jones's divorce case and the settlement being enormous, giving you an idea of the kind of total revenue they must have if they can slice a percentage out of that to the wife.
Should we mention the wife's ethnicity? Yeah, it's the same old story, isn't it? You know, and he's made millions, and yet you know, now he's always begging and so on. And anyway, yeah, it's
Nope.
Go on now. Sorry.
I was going to say the other narrative that's I think is important that goes along with what we mentioned before is the whole victim resentment and oppressed narrative. You know, they hammer in from the start, where the best they give the black people watching this to aspire to, you know, if you take the narrative of the film, is glee at someone else being killed, harmed, or brought down, or some sort of terrible scrabbling for scraps and crime. You know, this is, if this was a positive film, you know, you would never put in all this you know, think of yourself as a victim, this is what you should reach up to, resentment, hate, and so on. Because even if you believed you were oppressed or so on, it only traps you in this box. You're never going to reach up if that's all you're going to, you know, you're never going to reach high if you're reaching up to I'm a victim and hoping that somebody has something happen to them. You know, it's a horrible thing to position yourself with that's never going to create anything of worth.
Yeah, and I think that this is very deliberate. As I say, I think this is really putting a negative mentality, positioning black people and pigeonholing them into a certain way of being that is extremely negative. And you know, people like Barry White and Scatman Crothers and that what's the name of that guy on Miami Vice who's also in it? I forget his name. Phillips something or other. Anyway, but these are basically sellouts. They've sold out their own people. They you know, they're Shaboskoy, and they've you know, they're selling out black people by portraying them so negatively.
It's like a 1-2 punch, or they leave them stripped of everything in this vacuum of feeling helpless and resentful and oppressed, and then they fill up the hole with, you know, the baiting and the hate towards, you know, their neighbour, you know, which will just lead to this, you know, back and forth between them, which is why the film is unkind to everybody. Even later on, that it's unkind and mocking towards the white restaurant owners. It mocks them as well when they're falling over themselves to try and be kind, and it's quite awkward and cringy.
Yeah, that's right. You know, even ordinary people don't get out with any credit or any decency or whatever. So again, you know, it's interesting that whenever blacks try to rule themselves, if you like, because Jews have always talked about this special relationship between blacks and Jews. They're always promoting this idea, but actually, what have blacks got out of it apart from welfare? They've never got to rule themselves. They've never got self-determination in America. And the people who talk about self-determination, like Louis Farrakhan, derided by Jews or portrayed as cranks or whatever. There's there was this Dr. Leonard Jeffries, who, I mean, we all take the piss out of black studies and so on in college, but he taught at City College, New York, and he started talking about to what extent Jews were involved in slavery and how much more overrepresented they were than white slave masters. And suddenly they all came down on him. He was he was expelled from his position, although he was reinstated because he sued the college. But that just shows you that if they ever go against the narrative that Jews want to set for them, they suddenly get pushed outside of of their comfort, if you like, and the things that they've been given, the positions that they've been set up in. So they're allowed certain amounts of prestige and power and everything, so long as they know their position, if you like, as long as they know that this is as far as you go, and then that's it. You don't get to form your own societies. You don't get to define who you are yourselves. You don't get to construct your own narratives. All that, we're taking for you, meaning the Jews. And it was the same with Saul Alinsky at this time that the film came out. He was, rallying black groups and everything. I talked about before about this plan he had to, which was up on Countercurrents, actually. Someone wrote an article on it, where he wanted to get a load of Negroes and basically feed them up full of baked beans, and then send them into a concert hall where a classical music concert was being held, and basically sit there and fart. And exactly. But,
and from there, great things come about, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Inspirational.
Yeah, but doesn't that just show you what these people think of black people? I mean, we take the piss sometimes and everything out of them, but we don't show any degree of hatred like that for these people, unless, of course, they're behaving so badly, like, for example, the black gangs in London and everything, or even pretty much in every major city now. We do show hatred for those people, but we don't show hatred for blacks in general. We don't show hatred for ordinary black people who are just sort of being them, getting on with life and trying to better themselves and trying to better their own people without pulling anyone else down.
Yeah, it's the difference between with the kind of mentality that would create this film. It's a hatred and a mockery for even their potential. Any potential whatsoever they could have for themselves and to do good for themselves.
There's no positions of power in the movie for a black person that would seem like a black person would want to achieve, because a movie should always at the end give you a message of some description. That message in that movie, although some people might think it's a pro-black movie, it's really not. It's pretty much saying to you guys who are black, this is all you will amount to. This is all you'll ever amount to. And it's staringly obvious. That's why they give all the black people in the film trumpet lips. The only glamorous one in the movie is towards the end of the dinner party, where the two white people say something to the effect of, "We've always wanted people like you among us." I mean, it really pokes fun at everybody. And it's poking fun at primarily whites and blacks and telling them that they're fighting over something, or they're fighting against each other. And at the end of the day, a Jewish guy wrote this movie with the sole intention of doing just that to you.
And there's also the part with Old Man Bone. It's with the barbershop background, if you remember, where he's talking about the essentially white flight, where he's sort of saying, "Oh, we've all got our part to play," as one leaves, and then the sort of, and I think he actually even mentions Jews leaving the neighbourhood and we flood in, kind of thing. We've all got a part to play.
There is a little Jewish character in the movie. There's a little Jewish guy in the movie, but he's got like a big sort of bushy beard, and he's like all small and hunched up, and he goes over. I can't remember what he says, It's some.
Oh, he gives the Tommy gun to Sonny
Yeah, yeah, and
and
he
tells
walks
him he's to
away.
kill Rabbit.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying it right there. They're telling you right there.
That's right. They're basically uh, taking both sides to to
Yeah,
create war against each other. It's
It's like a
it's funny
graphic version of that game, kids might play at school where they whisper and say, "Oh, see, so and so, they said this about you. You should go and fight them in the playground." And then they go to the other one. Did you hear what they said about you? You should go fight them in the playground. It is right back to that kind of schoolyard mentality, but done in a grand scale with worse consequences.
that's right.
Yeah.
It's so staringly obvious when you watch it that this is the only people that are really watching this and laughing together are Jewish people. I can't see audience members watching this back in 1975 full of cinemas of black people just laughing at this because you couldn't. It's not even funny accidentally. The only people laughing are the people at the receiving end of the gate receipts.
And it even makes fun of, it makes fun of, obviously, it shows that the kind of liberal do-gooder kind of trying hard white couple in the restaurant, but it also makes fun of the radical black revolutionary types, very aggressively making fun of them, where it's got the whole Black Jesus character and his revolution, making fun of the money grubbing and the performance. And of course he's naked and ridiculous looking. It is nothing at all sympathetic about that either.
Is he
It,
not
it
like?
leaves nothing but ashes, this film, really, at the end. When you think of everybody it attacks. Well, certainly between blacks and whites, there's nothing but ash after.
I personally think as well that Black Jesus character, he was very much a piss take out of the Nation of Islam types.
Yeah,
again,
that's their way of disarming the sort of free native, own ethnic groups.
Yeah, that's right. Although there is a certain amount of truth to it in that they were co-opting a foreign religion for themselves that's been antagonistic to themselves in the past, actually, because nobody's slaved as much as the Arabs. So I've never understood Nation of Islam. I'll be honest in that respect. I understand it in terms of having an ethnic religion, but they're not. They've co-opted an Arab religion, a Semitic religion, essentially. Although there again, I would say exactly the same thing about whites and Christianity. So
Yeah.
But it's another thing that was interesting going back to this Miss America woman, who's a really crude symbol of how America's meant to be, and she's always meant to be luring the black man and then doing him down and so on. But actually, that's not really true in the narrative, is it? Because it always starts with the black man trying to rape her.
Yeah, or ogling over her and being wooed by her. And this is like another blatant thing they're saying. They're not laughing with you. Like if you're a black person, this isn't a movie for black people to laugh at whitey at. This is pretty much saying that black people want to rape young, pretty white girls, preferably blonde girls.
And did you notice as well something for the feminists in there, where the Miss America says help rape at one point, and the kind of old man Bone is hanged on the spot.
Yeah.
Now, what happened to all the outcry about rape culture and how this is this is obviously a big thing that's constantly in the news? Yet this is showing women as given false allegations of rape for no reason apparently, or petty reasons that are never explained.
That's the beauty of it though, because whoever's written it has written it both ways. He's saying that in one point, yeah, she these guys all do want to rape her, but then she's actually asking you for it, Because remember when the guy's singing the song, he's singing a song about being a poor old black guy. Then she starts screaming rape and they hang him. But at the same time, they make her out to be the seductress so that any legitimate claims that might be true in that regard as rapes carried out by black men and white women in that area. And that at that time might have been a very big news story. And they might have been making a joke about it to say it doesn't happen when it might actually have been happening.
You could almost imagine this is a film that tries to fool everybody by pretending to be everybody's greatest ally while having no intention at all from the beginning.
Yeah, it's true that in that one scene, yeah, she's sort of the instigator and everything. She's the evildoer. But in two other cases, it's actually the black man who starts off trying to rape her, and then she sort of defends herself or whatever, once with knuckle dusters, another by shooting the guy. But it's interestingly that sort of caricature, this big, overly developed woman who's extremely strong and yet attractive in some ways, but yet obviously oversized and sort of more powerful than the men and everything. That actually goes back to an animator called Robert Crumb. It's very interesting that Robert Crumb, he was a really weedy little guy, and he ended up marrying someone who was a feminist and who was bigger and stronger than he was. His wife actually was one of the women who ran women's comics back around that time. But Robert Crumb, he also created Fritz the Cat. And Fritz the Cat was Ralph Bakshi's first film, and it's what he made his name off the back of. Robert Crumb was actually really upset with the film and didn't want that, didn't like it at all, or that Bakshi made it. But that was made on a budget of $700,000. And it actually made back $90 million. As I say, it's what made Bakshi's name. But really, using Robert Crumb's animation, he pretty much stole his cartooning from Robert Crumb. And Robert Crumb, as I say, he has these extremely big, butch, but yet at the same time attractive women, who are much stronger than the men, and and are dominating and so on, which is his own little fantasy. And Bakshi, he's put that into this film. But yeah, you're right in that it's very odd, because she's extremely negative at the same time, which would really upset the feminists, wouldn't it? Bizarrely.
It makes fun of everybody. It's one of these films where there's, like I said, there's only one group of people who seem to avoid all the stereotypes and the archetypes.
Yeah, I mean, even look at now, of course, the whole transgender thing's big now. I mean, this thing is absolutely ruthless with them too. Both even having the humiliation of the bagman, one point dressed up and he goes into the bar and you see the most outrageous stereotype there too.
And the funny thing is, what really got to me about this movie, it wasn't really all that shocking. I know it's like a really kind of shocking movie and it's got a lot of racial stereotypes, but there was nothing in there that really offended me or that I hadn't heard before about a million times. But I imagine back then it probably would have been completely surreal to someone like me from this part of the world to watch this and think, oh my God, that's only happening a few thousand miles away across the ocean. But that's happening right now in places like London, and it's not really so shocking anymore.
Yeah, that's the trouble when you're relying shock value in when you're on a slippery slope. You can't get by with just an aristocrat's joke anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we saying then that this film was ahead of its time?
Well, like I said, I mean, you could probably go down to London and say 10 times worse.
Oh, there was one bit in it as well. Just the bag man. It reminded me there when he gets his comeuppance at the end, according to the film, where they put him in blackface and drag. Because once again, they're doing, they're attacking everybody at the same time. The white, the blacks, and the transsexuals. But he ends up getting shot. Hmm?
And the Italians as well. That really
Yeah, of course. Yep.
go
Another
for
at the
them.
time, of course, big ethnic group, politically. But he gets his comeuppance, and it gives this kind of monologue moment where they says, "Oh, Mannigan, that was his name. Mannigan's racism caught up with him, and that's why he was killed." Except he was drugged and painted up, and his comrades were killed. So,
right.
What part of that would have been prevented with him being non-racist? It had nothing to do with racism. He was a bagman for a competing godfather. He was drugged up and then killed. So, but yet it claims that it was because of his racism.
Yeah, well, this is this is the chutzpah, if you like, to use a Jewish word, of the film. In that, what does Rabbit get set up as? He gets set up as a godfather. So he's exactly the same as the antagonist in the film, but yet he's the good guy somehow. How does that work? And you've got in the club, for example, where the bagman gets took, he gets this bit of LSD in the sugar cube dropped into his drink, which he drinks, of course, and has all these weird hallucinations and everything, and ends up again in some kind of weird transvesticism. A lot of transvesticism in this film, actually.
Yeah.
But again, this drugs are seen as perfectly all right. Blacks should take drugs. Oh, yeah, why not? When drugs are actually what's destroyed black communities and white communities, for that matter.
Even there's a wee, it occasionally drops in these interludes, kind of small stories in between. It has the black single mother, so who's, when you listen to it, you're thinking, oh, what's the message here? But there's nothing positive, transformative at all about it. It's just, if you take it as a true story, it's another miserable story of a broken family and kind of hopelessly trapped people in this spiral or loop. It's not. There's nothing. Yeah, it's just not. It's such a bad film, such a negative film.
And then you got the lone saxophone player. I don't know what the hell that's all about. Where it just like suddenly zooms in on the black guy playing the saxophone in some snow-covered street when it wasn't snowing in the scene before. Explain that one.
That's, I think, lazy stock footage usage, which probably happens a lot in this, especially for backgrounds.
Yeah, I just want to briefly go back to that black single mother. She turns up as the prostitute later who gets married to Bear, doesn't she?
Ah,
is that right?
Enough.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
So again, you've got single mother, prostitute, and this is one of our heroes. What is this all about? How is this empowering for black people? This is horrible. But yeah, to come back now to the stock footage and so on. Yeah, the craftsmanship is actually horrible. It's interesting actually that in Felix the Cat, there was so much more attention to detail. It's a horrible film. Let's not get carried away. But the craftsmanship was much better. And in fact, what they did for the backgrounds in Felix the Cat was to get photos, put tracing paper over, and trace the outlines, and then make cartoons from those outlines, which takes longer, but it has a more authentic, within the frame of the cartoon kind of effect. It also shows that they actually care about creating something of beauty, but in this, not at all. As you said, stock footage is just thrown in haphazardly, and I can't help but feel that essentially backsheared become more interested in the shekels.
It's worth as well comparing anybody that's having any doubts about the quality is just compare it to animation from, be it Japan, Europe, or America in the 70s, and you'll see the quality difference. It's not an issue of that's what they had at the time. This is a quality issue and an effort issue.
Well, going back to the Song of the South, which often gets panned, and social justice warriors scream about the racism and so on in the Song of the South, but the craftsmanship is so much better in that. And I think that black people are treated with far more sympathy than in this. So you've got two things that are far better in that film that is seen as one of the most negative films ever and the most politically incorrect films. But yet this, apparently it's seen as the 97th best animated film in some survey or other of critics.
What were the other two? What did it beat? Like, what director's got that tarnished in his career now that your film's not quite as good as Coonskin?
You'd have to have had some sort of giant warehouse fire of all the animations in competition with to even get that high.
Well, again, we have to look at who the critics are and so on. Now, it's interesting that another one of its defenders, when it came out, was the New York Times. And I've forgotten the name of the critic. You'll have to excuse me. I will look it up and then come back to you. But he was Jewish. As I say, was the critic from the New York Times who said it was this was great. This was Richard Eder. That's him.
What part of it was great to him?
Oh, sorry, carry on, Neil.
You say what part of that movie could be considered great? I mean, there's some not bad scenes, but the only part people who would consider that to be great, I don't know, it's suspicious. Let's look at it that way. It's suspicious.
Yeah, it's just the quality alone should have been cast up, but it's like definitely you get the feeling watching the history of it, and you see the comments that the only reason this got to where it was is the critics, this sort of clique of well-known media ingrained critics can lead opinion or frame something that's, where as we've revealed, terrible, but then try and sort of frame it up. Oh, actually, don't worry, this is actually really on your side. This is actually going to help you somehow. And if people don't look at it critically and with the mind to sort of pick apart it and look for the flaws and the problems, they might even accept it. They might just go with this narrative they're handed that this is actually on their side.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons, of course, why we have created this channel and why I look at culture from our perspective. Because if you only have one perspective, certain people to be down the road of that narrative, and you're going to have a mentality that suits these people. And that's the same with culture as well, with the actual cultural text. But as I say, it's also to do with the interpretation of culture. So what you've got here is it's a Jewish text. Let's be honest about it. It's a Jewish text, and then you've got other Jews engaging in ethnic nepotism, saying that this is good and how it's good, and framing the discourse. And people who want to be seen to be intelligent lap it up. They're not intelligent, of course, because they've just accepted what they've been told, and received this criticism without any critique of their own, without critiquing the critique or critiquing the original text. And so what we're trying to do here, of course, is to balance that out a little bit, where people have can go to opposing views. And I think that, of course, ours is more honest and more balanced, because certainly we've talked about issues that pertain to black people in a far more honest way than what these people who've created the film and created the criticism around the film have done. So, unless there's anything to add, I think we better round this up.
Yeah, I think so. Just this should be like a public warning, this podcast, because we watched this film so that you guys don't have to. Take it from me, it's pretty crap.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that we don't mean offense to anyone, and even Jewish people who are not like this. Not every Jew is sort of some kind of megalomaniac trying to impose their culture on other people's and so on. I have nothing against an average Jew or whatever getting on with his life in Israel or whatever. Just wants to kind of run a shop or something like that. I have no problem with that guy. But these people, this certain clique and a large clique, they have to look at themselves very carefully, just as we're looking at them. And they have to be aware that we're looking at them as well. Because this cannot continue. They cannot continue to deconstruct other people's and to steal their culture from them and to deconstruct their culture and to give it back to them as some kind of perverse mockery of a culture.
And also give the message to be it blacks, whites, or any others that you can't rely on another people to be the creators and curators of your culture. That's the mistake we can see in this film.
Absolutely right. And I think that that's a good message to leave this podcast on. So I'll say goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Until next time, goodbye for now.